and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I just wanted to talk through another article that I found. The reason I've dug up this article is because one of the focus groups I attend as part of a local self-advocacy group, I attend a focus group that this self-advocacy group set up called Disabled Autistics Matter with the acronym DAM. And next Thursday at the local autism planning group, we're going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation, obviously via Zoom. It's all done online. Kind of talking about our focus group to the other stakeholders like the autism planning groups. Yeah, it'll be like people from the council and various other stakeholders. It's me and one other person from the DAM group. The other person has put together the PowerPoint. She's done all the hard work, and I'm helping to present the findings to the board. And as part of that, I just found this article which I've shared with her, so some of this article might be used in a PowerPoint presentation. Because the whole point of the DAM group is obviously we're highly critical of the neurodiversity movement, and we want to sort of raise awareness of the plight of autistics who are more disabled and have higher support needs. We also want to sort of ally ourselves with parents and carers of those with autism and associated learning disabilities and things like that. Because they also stand to lose quite a lot from the neurodiversity movement, and it might help to kind of form alliances as well. But yeah, so I found this article, and it's called "Is It Autism? The Line is Being Increasingly Blurred," and it's a 2019 article which I uncovered. Nouvelle Montreal. It's a Canadian article, and it cites research from a psychiatry professor called Laurent Montreal, who says that if current trends in diagnostic practices continue, the definition of autism may get too vague to be meaningful. So that's what the team led by psychiatry professor Laurent Montreal has said. And this research team found that the differences between people diagnosed with autism and the rest of the population are shrinking. However, this shrinkage is not a real shrinkage, as in it's not like actually the case that the differences between people with autism and the rest of the population are shrinking. It's simply that more and more people are being included in research studies who are increasingly similar to the rest of the population, so their differences are not quite so pronounced, because more and more research studies are including people with very, very, very mild, more like autistic traits, or like even self-diagnosed people, which is obviously creating a lot of noise in the data. So the study was published in JAMA Psychiatry, which is a very prestigious psychiatry journal, JAMA, JAMA Psychiatry. And Montreal and his team reviewed some analyses that were published between 1966 and 2019, and the analyses showed that autistics and the rest of the population exhibit significant differences in 7 areas. And these 7 areas are in emotion recognition, theory of mind, cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to transition from one task to another, activity planning, inhibition, evoked brain responses, which is the nervous system's response to sensory stimulation, and brain volume. So what Montreal and his team did was they looked at the effect size. The effect size is the size of differences between people with autism and without, and they compared the progression in the effect size over the years. Now, an effect size measurement is a statistical tool that quantifies the size of differences in a specific characteristic between two groups of participants. And what they found is that in each of the assessed areas, the measurable difference between people with autism and without has decreased over the past 50 years. They found a statistically significant dilution in effect size. A statistically significant dilution in effect size between 45% and 80% in 5 of the 7 areas, and there were only 2 of the measurements that didn't show this statistically significant dilution, and they were inhibition and cognitive flexibility. So in all of the assessed areas, the measurable difference between people with autism and without has decreased over the past 50 years in all of the 7 measurements. And in 5 of the 7 areas, there was a statistically significant dilution in effect size. So a really, really big dilution. And as I say, the only 2 measurements that didn't show a significant dilution was inhibition and cognitive flexibility. So I guess inhibition and cognitive flexibility is where you still see the greatest difference between people with autism and those without. But obviously, that can maybe be... It makes me wonder, though, whether that's because of the inclusion of other conditions such as ADHD and other things where people who are being diagnosed autistic who really have those other conditions. So I'm wondering about that as well. So that's just one of my things that came into my head. So he says this means that the people with versus without autism who are being included in studies are increasingly similar. If this trend holds, the objective difference between people with autism and the general population will disappear in less than 10 years. The definition of autism may get too vague to be meaningful, trivialising the condition, because we are increasingly implying a diagnosis to people whose differences from the general population is less pronounced. So that's what this psychiatrist Montreal says. He also, interestingly by the way, they also compared this reduction in effect size with other conditions, including schizophrenia, to see if this was specific to autism or whether the same thing had happened in other psychiatric conditions. And what they found with schizophrenia studies is that, unlike with autism, the prevalence has stayed exactly the same, and also the differences between people with schizophrenia and those without schizophrenia has remained stable over the years. So that's really interesting. So it seems that autism is kind of quite unique in this, because it hasn't occurred in other conditions. Because you might think, okay, maybe this is just a normal thing in psychiatry, conditions get widened, more people are included, effect sizes diminish, and, you might think that's just a part of normal progression, but it hasn't occurred in schizophrenia. So that shows that something specific to autism is happening that hasn't occurred in schizophrenia, or, as a specific example. So he says, so I'm going to move over to video number 2 now to carry on discussing this. So move over to video number 2.